This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello again team, it's Jess or JashiiCorrin and welcome back for another video. Today we are setting up for November 2021 in my bullet journal. But before we get into the setup, as per usual, we're just going to have a look at how this month was going. For October, I went with a Mean Girls theme. This is a theme that I've wanted to do for quite a while, and I figured that October was a perfect time to do that because October 3rd is International Mean Girls Day. I absolutely loved the bright pink and the contrast of that with the black and the white, and I found I've actually been a lot more consistent in filling out my trackers and using the pages of my setup this month. For my weekly layouts, I decided to continue with the simple style that I started using in September, which just has the initials for the weekdays at the top of the page, and is effectively a large running to-do list. At the end of my pages for October though, we have my November theme ideas spread, and then we're into the pages that I've sketched out for November. Now I did actually sketch these out a little bit too early. Early not in the sense of time, but early in the sense of where they are in my journal. Because as it turns out, I didn't actually give myself any more room to set up additional weekly spreads for October, which I did end up needing. But more on that later. Starting with our quote page, as you can probably tell from my sketching out, and also the title of this video, and maybe the thumbnail if you looked at it before you pressed on the video, my theme for this month is koi fish. This is a theme that I have wanted to do for such a long time, and I am super thrilled to actually be doing it. But at the same time, because it's something that I've wanted to do for so long, I feel like I actually ended up putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on myself this month. I second-guessed a lot of what I was putting onto these pages. In particular where it came to the monthly log, but we'll talk about that later as well. For my quote page here though, I've gone with the quote, "Don't be the reason you don't succeed." I do typically try and make the quote pages that I include each month themed to maybe an issue that I'm facing at the time. And I think recently I have been my own worst enemy when it comes to my success. I've been having a lot of feelings of stuff like imposter syndrome and just kind of second guessing whether I'm doing the right thing and where I'm going in life and a whole bunch of those kind of big questions, which at the best of times can be stressful enough, and putting that on top of all the other stuff that's going on, like selling a house and just all of the busyness that comes with the start of term 4 at school, it kind of just feels like I'm letting myself get in my own way. All of that to say that I've picked a quote for this month that I feel is a reminder that I need. In terms of the decoration on this page though, you can see we have a bunch of little koi fish drawings, along with some lily pads, and also these decorative corners. Starting by talking about the corners, I really appreciate that these are actually quite straightforward to draw once you know what you're doing. To do the ones that I've included in my setup, you start by drawing 3 boxes, one that's in the very corner of the page, one that's half a box up from this, and one that's half a box across from this. Once you've got those, you can then connect the corner box to the other 2 with 2 small lines, and then you can extend the edge of those 2 boxes that's closest to the corner box, upwards and across. From the end of those extended lines, you then draw additional lines going towards the edge of the page, and then off the end of those, you draw another line coming outwards from the corner, 1 box in length. From the end of those ones, you then draw another line going back towards the middle of the page, again 1 box in length, and then lines that are half a box long back towards the corner. From here we have another half box line back towards the edge, and then a line that's a full box long going away from the corner. We then draw a line back towards the outer edge, and then from here what you can do is draw a line that extends all the way to the next decorative corner, but for me I just extended these 2.5 boxes along the page. To finish the corner off, we then just draw in an additional larger square, which has corners that hit the center of those 3 original boxes. Hopefully this explanation, along with the visuals, made sense, but it is really just a collection of straight lines. Back to the quote page though, and adding in some final details to my koi fish. In terms of timing, this page took about 26 minutes from first touch of the pen to final erasings. As always though, this doesn't include the idea generation time or the sketching in time. If this is the first Plan With Me video that you're seeing from me, hello, welcome, it is a pleasure to have you here with us. But also I like to, where possible, include the time spent doing these layouts. It can be a bit difficult with the time lapse to get a real appreciation of how long these spreads actually take to set up. Quote page done though, and now it's on to the cover page. which also took me about 26 minutes. I started again by drawing in those decorative corners, and then after this I then went and embellished them with some Lilypad drawings. These ones are the most simple part of the decoration. You just start with an outline of a circle, and then effectively cut a wedge out of this coming from the center. I chose to outline mine with black pen, and then go in with my Tombow dual brush marker to add the colour. As always, all of the equipment I used in this setup can be found in the description box below, and that includes the numbers of the colours that I used for both the lily pads and for the koi fish. Speaking of the koi fish, it's time to add those to the page as well. I will say that again, this is another element that I was actually surprised at how easy it was to draw. The lily pads I kind of expected to be easy, they're effectively like a picture of a Pac-Man. But the decorative corners and the koi fish I expected to be a bit more difficult. Of course, I have a mini tutorial on how I drew the koi fish as well, so having a look at that one. The first thing I did was draw in a pencil line to indicate the spine or the back fin of my koi fish. I made sure to make it slightly curved and point in the direction that the koi fish was swimming. From here, around the outside of that line, I then draw a teardrop shape, where the rounded end of the teardrop is going to be the face of my fish. Off the face of the koi fish, I also draw in two little lines to represent their barbels, which are taste bud covered organs that they use to search for food. And I also use two little curved lines on the inside to indicate their eyes. To draw in their dorsal fin, I just add a wiggly line to the side of the curved line that I started with, and typically I liked to put this on the outside of the curve. The other fins, both the front and the back, are just drawn in as little triangles that have a wavy back edge, and the shape of the tail is a little bit hard to explain, but I made sure that it made gentle curves to kind of indicate that my fish was swimming. Once I'd penciled in the shape of my koi fish though, I then used my Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip brush pen to do the black line work, just going over the pencil that I already put in. As part of this, I also add two lines on either side of my little fish's face, just to kind of represent their gills, even though they wouldn't necessarily be visible from this angle. Once the main outlines are done though, it's then time to add some colour, and this is where again I go in with my Tombow dual brush markers. For my koi fish, I used 4 different shades of orange. I first started with the lightest shade and put in some blobs of colour wherever I really wanted them. The best part about this one is that you can be quite loose with it, put the colours in different spots, and then all of your koi fish end up being unique. I worked from the lightest shade to the darkest shade, and then once all the orange was in, it was time to go and add in some black. This is where I again used my Fudenosuke hard tip brush pen, and once all of the colouring of my koi fish was done, I then went in with a fine tip black pen. I decided to use the extra small Faber-Castell artist pen, just to add in some final detailing. So putting some small lines on all of the fins, including the dorsal fin, and then also on the tail. For all of the pages of this setup, rather than doing it fish by fish, I instead did all of the line work for all of the fish on the page, then all of the colouring, and then all of the detail work, just because it made the process a little bit faster. On my cover page here you can see that I also brought in more of that koi fish design in the November title, so doing a foligraphy outline and then colouring that in the same way that I coloured in the koi fish. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty dang chuffed with how this cover page turned out. It's probably my favourite page of the setup, but now as it's finished, it's time to flip over and head into the monthly log. Starting with a whole bunch of doodling. Thanks to the magic of editing, we do not have to watch me draw this in real time, because this spread took me over an hour to complete. That was in part because of the amount of doodling there was, and also in part because of the umming and ahhing that I had when it came to just doing the calendar portion. The doodles were fine, I sketched those in ahead of time, and knew exactly what I wanted to do with them. But in terms of putting the calendar on the page, I didn't know if I wanted to use thick lines or thin lines, I didn't know if I wanted to use a black pen or a green pen, and honestly, the choice that I ended up making, and that you'll see in this footage, I didn't really end up liking. Initially, I decided to draw the full calendar grid out using my Tombow Fudenosuke pen, which gave me quite thick grid lines. I felt that with the doodles that were already on the page, this made the page look more busy than I had otherwise intended. But after thinking about it for a few days, after filming this plan with me, I did end up going in and fixing that up. I do have some behind the scenes footage of that fix, which we'll look at once we finish the decoration. Another issue that I had when setting up this monthly log, that when it came to writing in the initials for each day of the week along the top, and the numbers on the calendar boxes, I hadn't really pre-planned what I wanted to use. So I opted in to use a gold acrylograph pen, but the value of this pen, or how light or dark it is, matches really well with the green that I was using for the Lilypads. This meant that when I wrote over them with that gold pen, you couldn't really see them. It didn't really stand out enough. The fix that I used for the initials for each day of the week was to go around the letters with a white gel pen, but this wasn't really possible for the numbers on the calendar. I tried to go over those numbers with a black pen, but that didn't really work either. And then, as I said, a few days later I decided I actually wanted to change the design of the calendar altogether. So taking some paper from my Archer and Olive notepad, I just cut it to size for each of the 2 separate parts of the calendar, ruled in the lines using a thinner pen, and then stuck this in with double-sided tape. Here you can see a progress shot for when I was halfway through, and here we have the final product, which honestly I think looks a lot better than the initially quite thick lines that I had. You can see we have a Dutch door running down the right hand side though, which is going to peek through to our next spread, which will have my habit tracker and social media schedule. To hold the page in place while I'm working, I just attached it at the top with a little bulldog clip, and now it's time to get started on setting up my habit tracker. The koi fish that I have running down the left hand side of this page are effectively just mirror images of the fish on the other side of the page. So that they fit into the Dutch door space nicely, to draw these in I just took a photocopy of the monthly log and then flipped over the page and traced these ones in. That way I knew that when I was cutting out my Dutch door, I wasn't going to cut over any of my decorations. For my habit tracker this month, I'm going with a vertical style. Effectively what we have is the numbers for the month running down the left hand side, and then along the top edge I'll be writing out my habits as little icons. To make the header for my habit tracker a little bit more decorative, I decided to enclose the letters for the habits header in Lilypads, and then drew in some small koi fish swimming between them. These were done in exactly the same way that I did the bigger ones, just on a smaller scale. In terms of timing, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, the habit tracker took about 30 minutes, but of course this doesn't include sketching in time or idea generation time. Before we move on to our next layout though, I wanted to take a moment to talk about our sponsor for this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an impressive all-in-one platform that you can use to make functional and beautiful websites to build your online presence. Some of the features of this awesome tool are that Squarespace websites are mobile optimized, meaning any of the content that you build into your website is going to look great on any device. If you're looking to use your Squarespace website to build an online storefront, there's no limit to the number of products you can sell, and Squarespace has all the tools you'll need to get your business up and running, including a simple checkout process and secure payments for your customers. As someone who isn't very savvy when it comes to website building, I can totally understand the process of getting a website up and running to be very daunting, but Squarespace makes it simple and straightforward to get yourself set up with a beautiful and functional website. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/JashiiCorrin to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now we're on to my social media schedule. I've talked about it before, but this is one of the most helpful pages in my setup. Although I do keep track of all of this planning on Notion as well, I find it just really useful to have in my journal to refer to when I need it. Although Notion works really well in terms of allowing me to take notes about my videos, and move my schedule around and record content ideas, that kind of stuff, I just find that having a physical list in my journal is really satisfying. I in particular get a lot of satisfaction being able to check things off a physical to-do list. So for now, this page is certainly here to stay. I have recently been considering making a separate journal for these pages though, so a separate journal for all of my JashiiCorrin content planning. I haven't made any formal decisions about that just yet, but it is something that I'm musing with. Of course, if I did set one of those up, that would be another Plan With Me video that you'd have from me every month. What do you guys think? Do you think I should make a separate journal, or just keep it in the one I've got? My content schedule page took about 20 minutes though, and then it was over the page and onto my meal log, which took about 24. Does anybody else have it that whenever they come to doing their meal plan for the week or deciding what's for dinner, they literally forget every single food they enjoy eating? Because That happens to me way too often, which is why I actually find my meal log to be a very helpful layout. All it is listing down the dinners that I eat for the entire month, but it means that when Vogel and I come to do our meal planning, I can look back at my past meal logs to figure out what it is I like to eat, because in the moment, I just can't seem to bring anything to mind. It also means that when he complains that we're having a certain meal too many times, I have historical data about the number of times we've actually had that meal. I must admit I use it much less often for that reason, compared to the just forgetting what I enjoy eating reason, but in general I do find it to be a very helpful layout to have for me personally. After the meal log though, on the right hand page we're going to have the fastest part of today's setup, coming in at 3.5 minutes. My first weekly layout. I don't usually include my weekly setups in my monthly plan with me video, but I thought I would today because it was so simple. I've decided to continue with the simple Alistair method that I used in October and September, just because I'm finding it's actually working really well for me. Effectively, all we have is a column for each day of the week with the initial for that day at the top, and then the rest of the space is just to write down your tasks. I do have a separate video on that one, which is linked in the description box, so do be sure to check that one out if you hadn't already seen it. As I said at the start of this video, koi fish is a theme that I've wanted to do for such a long time, and I'm glad that I finally got around to doing it. I am very chuffed with how my layouts turned out, even though there were some difficulties. Looking at you, monthly log. That brings us to the question of the day for you though. What is a theme that you really want to try in your journal? I think outside of koi fish, my next biggest one would probably be a galaxy theme, but I'm still not feeling super confident on being able to tackle that one just yet. For the final flip through though, we have my quote and cover page, my calendar style monthly log before the fixes, my vertical style habit tracker and social media scheduler, the meal log and first weekly layout. It's crazy to think that there's only 2 months left of this year, and I am so excited about the content that I have coming up for you guys. If you hadn't already and felt so inclined, do feel free to subscribe to my channel for more on planning, productivity and personal development. As always team, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!